Hello everyone, welcome to Vab Fashion's YouTube channel. My name is Eunice. In this video, I'll be sharing with us how I made this neatly tailored transparent cupped corset you see right here on the table using the bust caging technique. In my previous video, I already showed us how to draft and cut this corset. So if you haven't seen the video on how to draft and cut this corset, I'll be dropping the link to the video in the description box and also in the comment section. So please do well to click on the link so that you can watch and understand how we came about this. This will make it easier for you to understand. So, if you haven't subscribed to my channel or you're new to my channel, please click on the subscribe button to subscribe and ensure you put on your notification bell so you get a notification every time I upload a new video. And also feel free to share this video, like this video, leave a comment, ask your questions if you have any. So without wasting much of your time, let's get right into the video. Okay, I've cut out my pieces and this is what we have. So let's start with the cups first. As you can see, this is our center cup. I added half inch round the pattern. So that's my seam allowance. I have two pieces for the lining and two pieces for the main fabric. So meaning for the center cup, I cut out four pieces. I'm using my satin for both lining and fabric. But here on the lining, I ironed lightweight gum stay. Lightweight gum stay. This is because we're going to be caging the bust. Okay, I'll be sewing bone into it. So you want to give it a little bit of stability. So here on the main fabric, I ironed hasty and I doubled my hasty. I repeated the same thing on the side cups. You will notice that I notched this point to indicate that I'm joining this point and this point together. I also notched on the fabric. So this will be the arrow I have here. So you notch so that you know which side you are joining together. So this is our front piece. What I went ahead to do, I don't want to have joinage. Remember I said I had half inch to the center piece, half inch to the side piece. I don't want to have joining. All I did was just to tape my pattern down together. And see, I didn't allow it overlap on each other. All I did was just to bring them together. It's a straight line. I brought it together and I taped it down. So I can cut out one piece for the front. And this is what our front looks like. And you see, so this is the cup area and this is the cup area. So you also notice that I added my sewing allowance of half inch round it as well. This is it. So this is what we have, and I added half inch to the sides also. Okay, so these are these are back piece, the center back and the side back. I did the same thing by adding half inch all rounded. So for the side back, and see I have two pieces. For the center piece, I also have two pieces. One will be on the left and one will be on the right. Okay, so now my pieces, how many pieces I have here? I used the corset mesh is the base. That's the main base of the corset. Okay, I used the corset mesh, which is this. Then I cut my skin net. I cut two pieces of the skin net. So first is the corset mesh, two pieces of the skin net, and then two pieces of the green. Okay, so basically I have five pieces here. So you want it to be as firm as possible. The essence of this green is because I'm using an emerald green lace. This is to give it that green effect to just still maintain the color while still maintaining the skin. That's that bare skin effect. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So what I mean here is that I have five layers. Okay, the corset mesh, two layers of net, and then two layers of the green net. So I have this on all of them. So the side, all of them have the five pieces. Even the center, that's even the front piece, all have the five pieces. So here, this is my yoke. For the back yoke, each of them, I have the left and the right, and I cut out two pieces for the each of them. Okay. So for the back, I have two pieces for the left, two pieces for the right, and then for the front yoke also, I cut out two. One will serve as the lining for the other. So that is why we have two pieces of each of them. So you can see this is our yoke here. Okay. I also went ahead to cut out these strips that you can see here. I cut the strip on bias. So you must make sure to place it on bias so that it can fold well. And the strip I have here, each of them are 1.5 inches in width. 1.5 inches in width, and then the length it's just cut as long as possible. I have about seven of them here. This is what we're using for to case our bonnet. Okay, so now it's time for us to go to the sewing machine so that we can start stitching our pieces together. Okay, so I'll be starting with creating the casings for our regling boning. And here I have this cord. It's just a rope that we use for our manual sewing machine. You can use any rope of your choice. So I'm going to place it on the right side of the satin. I'll place it and then I'm going to stitch it. I'm just going to top stitch it like this. Make sure to place it on the right side. So having stitched it, I'm going to flip the rope to be inside the fabric. Now I'm going to fold the fabric into two. And you see, and then I'll have the rope inside it. And I'm going to stitch in, from the beginning, I'm going to stitch like I'm stitching on a Y shape, and then before I'll go ahead and start stitching straight. And while stitching straight, you want to make sure that the space you are leaving inside is enough. That's the space that is going to be inside is enough for your boning to pass through. For my boning, I have a 1/2 inch boning. So I remember I said my fabric is 1.5 inches in width. So when you fold 1.5 inches into two, you're going to have 3/4, that's 7.05. So I'm going to stitch on 1/4 inch so that I have a space of 1/2 inch on these bias. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So I'll be stitching on 1/4 inch so that I'll have a space of 1/2 inch that I'll insert the boning into the strip. So after stitching the bias just like this, I'm going to now start pulling it out. So the rope I have here will make it very easy for me to pull out the strip. That's to turn it inside out, and this is it. It is that simple. Just stitch your rope like I did, you won't have any problem. So this is what our bias looks like. I'm going to fold it in such a way that the stitch, the part that has the stitch, will be at the middle. It will not be at the left or at the right. It has to be at the middle. So now this is my regling boning. I'm going to insert it into the bias I have here. So this is because the bias is 1/2 inch in width, so it will make it very easy for my regling boning to pass in. So you can see how I'm pushing it in. You just want to gently do this. Please make sure that the part with the stitch, that's the part you stitch, is exactly at the center. So that part will be the one laying on the outfit. You don't want to see the joining. You want to make sure that it's neatly hidden. I hope we get that. So this is what our strip looks like with the boning inside of it. So I'm going to do this for all the remaining strips that I have, and then I'll take this to my ironing table and give it a very good press, and then I'll show us the next thing to do. So this is what I have after giving my Regilene boning a very good press. Can you see how nice and flat the fabric is? It is well relaxed. So right now I'm going to stitch my pieces together. So you want to make sure to place them correctly. So this is the center. I'm placing the center and the side together. Remember, I notched the points where we're joining. You don't want to mistakenly interchange them. So you want to be very careful with this. Make sure that you have notched the parts you're going to join. So this is our side back and our center back. So take note of what I'm doing. I am joining on the right side. The green side is the right side of the fabric. So I am stitching on 1/2 inch on the right side of the fabric. On the right side is what I am stitching, please. So for the other side, I will repeat the same thing. I'm going to also stitch on the right side using my 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I haven't done this. I'm going to bring in the front piece. Now this is the one for this side. I'm also going to stitch on the right side of the side seam, and I'm stitching on 1/2 inch, which is the sewing allowance I added. Repeat the same thing on the other side. Take note that every stitch is on the right side. So I'll do the same thing for the second one, or for the second side. And then I'm going to reduce my seam allowance. I'm going to reduce my seam allowance very, very well to the barest minimum, because we're going to have our boning sitting on this seam allowance. So just like this, my 1/2 inch is, my sewing allowance is 1/2 inch. I'll reduce it to as low as 1/4 inch. And I'll do that for all the parts I joined together. Okay, so after reducing my seam allowance, I went ahead to give the corset base a very good press. So right now our corset base is ready, and it's time for us to start stitching our bonings on it. So here I folded my fabric into two to get the center front, and then the upper part, which is the bust bridge, I'll get the midpoint also. So now I have the center front. I'm going to use my straight roller to connect a straight line starting from the top to the hem. So this is where I'm going to have the first boning, which is at the middle. Then from the midpoint, I'm going to measure 2.5 inches. The down part here, I'm also going to measure 2 inches, and I'll connect with a straight line. So this is where we'll have the second boning. So for the third boning, I'm going to have it there at the side. So I'll just measure what I have there, making sure to leave my ½ inch seam allowance, which is what we'll be using to stitch at that point. So I'll mark ½ inch first. So it is after this ½ inch, I'm going to have the next boning line. Okay, and then at the down part, I measure 2 inches. I'll connect this. So this totally depends on your preference, how you want your bonings to be. So this is what I actually want here. Okay, so the next boning is going to be exactly at the side seam, and we're going to have the waist cinching effect. We're going to have 3 bonings sitting at that point. 2 will start from the waistline and 1 will start from the top of the corset. So right now I want to get the waistline, and you can see that the waistline is well defined. That place just goes in. So a very simple way to get the waistline, I'm just going to measure from the down part of the corset. I'll go up by 5.5 inches, which I already know that that's the waistline, because the corset length is 22 inches plus ½ inch for sewing the down part, and the front half length is 17 inches. So when you subtract 17 from 22.5, that will give us 5.5 inches. So I just went up by 5 inches from the hem of the corset, so I know that that's the waistline. And even looking at my fabric on the table, you can see that the waistline is well defined. Okay, so and then I'll also have a boning at the back there. So what I did on this side, I will repeat on the other side, because you want your bonings to be even. You want them to be similar. What you have on the left should be what you should have on the right. So now for the boning I'll have at the side, which is the waist, I came out by 3 inches from the side seam, and I also came out by 3 inches on the side seam towards the back as well. Can you see how I just drew my lines from the waistline? So it's more like an upside down V shape. Just watch carefully what I'm saying, what I'm doing. You will really understand what I am doing. Okay. So now this is the first boning we're going to have at the midpoint here. So I'm just going to place my boning. I want to make sure that it is well centralized. I'm going to place it here at the midpoint, and then I'll stitch on both sides of the boning. You want to make sure that you are stitching very close to the tip. You want to take your time here, because this is going to be on the outside of your transparent corset, so you don't want to have any roughness. Just make sure that your work is very neat. Take your time to do this, just like I am doing here. You can see. So I'm going to cut out my excess, and then I will stitch the other side. So as you are stitching, you want to make sure that you are stretching out the fabric. So when you use your 2 hands, just like I'm doing, and stretching out the fabric, you will have this nice and flat, well relaxed look. Okay, so now I'm going to sew the second boning. I'll make sure to follow the line I have here too. I'll repeat the same thing just like I did for the first one. I will stitch on both sides. So as you can see, I cut out the excess of the boning, and this will be enough for me to stitch on the side, starting from the waistline to the hem here. So as you can see, I cut the boning to be slanted at the upper part. You don't want to leave this straight. You want to make sure that it fits into that waistline well. And then I'm going to also repeat the same thing by stitching on both sides of the boning. Just take note of what I said. You make sure that the boning, you cut it slantly at the top, because it has to sit on the waistline. We're going to have 2 bonings facing each other there. So it's going to give us like a triangular shape. So having done that one, having stitched the one on the waistline, I'm going to stitch the one on the side, and then I'll come back and show us how we're going to be stitching the side boning. Can you see how this side that I've done already is? So, and for the back, I also went ahead to cover the back that's the joining there with my boning. So now this is it for this side. So I also cut the boning slanted, so you can see how I'm placing them to face each other. So you can see it's more like an A shape, that's like an upside down V. Please be careful when you are sewing this and watch carefully how I stretched out my corset. You want to make sure that you stretch it out well so that you don't have any gathering or any tackiness around there. You see, I'll cut out the excess as well. So this is what it looks like. So now I'll bring in the last boning and then I will use it to cover up this part. So before covering up, you can see I'm still reducing my seam allowance. Like I said, your seam allowance needs to be as small as possible so that when you place your bone in there, it just sits nice and flat. So this is it. So you want to make sure to stretch out this part. So now when the three bonings are going to overlap on each other, it's not really going to be easy because we have two on the waist already facing each other and then we're sewing another one. Your thread is likely to cut around here because it's going to be quite thick. So you don't want to rush this part. Just make sure that you are sewing gently, very gently. You need to be as slow as possible around here because the tendency of your thread cutting here is very high because the bonings right now are very thick. But if you do this carefully, you will achieve a good result. So right now I'm done with one side, so I'll stitch the other side. Okay, so I've completely stitched all the bonings to the corset base, and this is what it looks like on the reverse side. Very neat. And this is what it looks like on the right side. It's still very, very neat. So it's now time for us to press the corset base. So now this is what I'm doing on the waistline. Can you see how I'm bending the waistline? So you're kind of creating like a break. Just break the boning around that part so that it sits well. So when ironing this corset base, you don't want to iron this part flat. Make sure that your bust ham is under this part. Don't iron it flat on the table. It's not supposed to be flat. So place your bust ham under it so that you iron it and it gives that standing effect so that it stands well. So now this is the piece of fabric I'll be using to create the eyelet panel at the back, and I have two of them. I cut my fabric on fold of 2 inches, and the length is quite longer than the length I have at the center back. On fold of 2 inches, I ironed hasty to it, and I folded half inch on both sides, just like you can see. Can you see? I folded half inch on both sides and I folded it into two. So when you fold into two, that will be 1.5. So I'm going to place a boning here right at the center where I have the crease line. I'll place it just on the other side. That's now it is on the other side. So I stitched my boning away from the crease line and then I gave a space of half inch and I stitched another boning just very close to the end where I have the folded part. Now, I have two bonings here. You can have more than two here. You can completely cover up the space, just stitch bonings here. But this is because I use perforator to create my own eyelet holes. So if you're going to use soldering iron, you can sew as many bonings here so that when you are going, then you have to use your soldering iron to create your holes. I prefer to use I prefer to use my perforator to create this because it gives me very tiny holes and it helps the eyelet to sit very firm at the back. I hope this is clear. So like I said, you can have several bonings here. For me, I just have two and this is fine. So now this is it. So the next thing I'm going to do is to place the eyelet panel at the center back, and then I'm going to show us how I'll be stitching it to the center back. Okay, so to stitch the eyelet panel to the back, so can you see what I did? I placed the corset in between the panel and making sure that the center back aligns with the folded part, and then I'm marking where the fabric stops. Remember that it's a transparent fabric so I can see it. So having marked it, I'll place my eyelet panel. The side with the boning is the part I placed on the back now. And then I'm going to be stitching on that half inch that I ironed. That's the crease line. I'm stitching exactly on that half inch. Please take note that is the part with the boning that I stitched to the back here. So now I'll flip it. The part without the boning now is now going to be on the right side of our corset. So you want to make sure that this is well relaxed. If you notice any bulkiness inside, you can reduce what you have. That's the allowance you have inside. So right now I'm going to top stitch this panel here on the right side. You want to make sure that this is as neat as possible. So when doing this, just stretch it out. Can you see how I'm holding it very well? Make sure that you're stretching it out so that it doesn't have any gathering. You see? So watch carefully what I'm doing. So like I said, if you have any excess, if you notice that it's giving you a bulkiness, it's not looking flat, just trim it out. So after stitching it, this is what I have. So the next thing I'm going to do is to top stitch the bonings now that I have inside. So of course I can feel the boning because it's hard. Can you see? So I'm going to just make sure to just use my hand to identify where the boning ends. So I'm going to stitch it down. So now this is the boning that is on the wrong side, but because I can feel it, I'm running a top stitch on it. Can you see? So I'll go to the second one, leaving the space of ½ inch, and then I'll stitch the second one. So of course, boning is something you can feel. So I was able to feel it, so that's why I stitched it. And this is what I have here. So the space I have in between the two stitches is the part that I'll have my eyelets sitting. Okay, so that's that. So I'm going to trim out my excess fabric, and then I'll show us the next thing to do. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is to neatly turn the hem of the corset. So here I have my 1 inch fabric that I cut on bias, just like the one we use for our boning. I first of all folded the starting point. I folded in ½ inch, and then I'm stitching on ½ inch down at the base here. I'm going to stitch it all the way to the end of the corset. So I haven't stitched it all the way to the end. I'm going to trim out my excess, making sure to leave about ½ inch. And then, and you see, then I'll fold in ½ inch and turn it to top stitch on the right side. But before doing that, I'm going to reduce my sewing allowance that I have here at the hem. I'm going to reduce it to 1/4 inch. So after reducing it, I'll fold in ½ inch and then fold again. So you know you want to neatly cover up the rough part, just fold it in. And then I'm going to carefully top stitch this now on the right side. So this is a good and a beautiful way to finish the hem of your corset. So I'm going to just stitch this, and then I'll show us the next thing to do. Okay, so after stitching the bias to the base of the corset, this is what we have. And you see how beautiful and clean it is. Very clean. So now the next thing we're going to do is to create our cups so that we can cage the bust. So here I have the side and the center cup. You want to make sure that you don't misplace your pattern so that you know which side you are going to be joining to which side. As for me, you can see I notched the part I'll be joining together. So I place the side cup over the center cup and I'm stitching on ½ inch. Just watch carefully, I'm sewing it into it. So you can see after stitching them together, they are equal at the upper part. You don't want to let one of your own be longer than the other. So after stitching now, I went ahead to notch the center cup so that I know which one is the center and which one is the side. So that when you are joining, you don't interchange them. Remember, they are looking alike. And then I went ahead to iron the seam lines open. I did the same thing for both lining and fabric. So now this is my regilling boning. First, I'm going to mark ½ inch round this cup. I'm just going to come down by ½ inch. So this part is going to be the base, is going to be the base of our boning. Remember, we are doing bust caging. So I'm marking ½ inch round, and then I'll mark ½ inch round the cup. Just watch carefully. You will get it right if you pay attention to details. So having marked my ½ inch round, now I'm going to place the boning. Watch carefully the way I'm placing the boning. I'm placing it in the way that it curves. It's sitting into it, okay? So now I'll stitch the upper part of the boning on the space created for us to stitch. So I'm stitching on the upper part. There's a small space where you stitch your regilling boning if you have been using a boning. So can you see how I'm placing the cup? I'm curving it. Now, the way I'm placing the boning, I'm curving it into the cup. So I stitch just on the upper part. Then I'm going to place another boning under the first boning I have here. I'm placing it under, and then I'll stitch on the outer part of the boning. That's I'll stitch on the outside part. Remember, I stitched on the upper part for the first boning I placed. I'm also stitching on the outer part here, leaving the inner part. I'm not touching the inner part. That means I'm stitching this boning just once first for now. So once I get to the end, I'm going to tuck the other part of the boning to sit under the base at the upper part. Can you see? So it is sitting under the base, it's not on top of it. Now bring this boning. Can you see how I inserted the boning into the base of the boning? You don't want to leave the tip outside. That's the essence of not stitching that part. So make sure that you insert it under the boning. And then I'm going to stitch, and I take note that I'm stitching in a crisscross manner. And then I'll cut out the excess and then also tuck it under the base of the boning. So this is one side, and then I'm going to top stitch the other side of the crisscross boning, not of the other, not the one that is on the base. So now this one that is crisscross, I'm stitching on the two sides. So now I'll bring in the next boning, and I'm also going to place it on the other side. So you can see they are crisscrossing on top of each other. Watch carefully. I made sure to tuck in the boning under the base that I have there already. So you will notice that my thread keeps cutting. When you are doing boss caging, the tendency of your thread cutting is really high. So that's it. You just need to be careful. So once I get to the end, I'm going to cut out the excess and tuck it under the base, and then I'll stitch on the other side also. So you can see I've stitched my crisscross, and this is it. So the next one will be exactly at the center here. That's at the place where I joined the side center cup and the side cup. Okay, so I'm going to place it inside. Now can you see that I tucked it under the base of the boning, and then I'm going to stitch on the two edges of the boning. So my thread keeps cutting. I decided not to fast forward this part so that you know that it's going to happen to you when you are sewing. So doing boss caging has a way of cutting your thread, but just take your time and it will come out well. So I'll cut out my excess and tuck it under the base also. So once I tuck it in, I'm going to stitch the other side of the boning. So for the bonings that are inside, I've stitched on all the two sides of the boning. So now this is what I have here. Okay, you see? So the next thing now I'm going to do after stitching all the bonings, I'm going to now stitch the second side of the base. That's the main base of the boning now. I'm going to stitch the second side that has been allowing me tucking all my boning. So I'll now stitch on the second side. I'll repeat the same thing. So now it's basically locking up all the bonings. I hope we understand that. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'll stitch, and then you can see I've secured all the bonings to sit under the base I created. Okay, so after caging the bust, this is what I have. And here is my bust hem, so I'm going to give this a good press. I'm first of all ironing it from this side where I have my satin, and then I'll turn it to the wrong side like this. You want to turn it out, and then I'm going to hold it. You want to make sure that you are molding it. Can you see the way I'm placing it on the bust hem? You need to iron it well. You don't want to make the mistake of ironing this wrongly, so that you don't make your bust cage flat. So the way you hold it determines the result you're going to have. So if you mold it perfectly, if you mold it well, your cup will stand well. Okay, so here I'm pressing it. So for the records, if you are doing this for a big size, you may have to have more bonings. Like the crisscross I have, you can see I only have two crisscross and one at the middle. So if it is a big size, you may have like four crisscross, you understand? So the bigger your cup, the more caging you will do. For this person, this is just a bust 34. So you can see it's not really big. So what I have here is just perfect. So now the next thing I'm doing now is fleshing. You can see I've placed my hemming gum on the cup like this, and then I'm placing my fiber. Can you see? This is called fiber. So I'll trim out my excess. First, I placed hemming gum on the cup, on the part with the bonings, and then I placed the fiber over it. So I am steam pressing it. So because my iron is steam iron, so it will help the hemming gum to dissolve, and then it will gum the fiber to it. So this is actually called fleshing. So this will make the cup not look rough and hard. So you want to give it that smoothness so that it has that natural burst effect. Okay. So this is me trimming out my excess. So after ironing this first base, if you notice that it is not as soft as you want it to be, you can still add more, just like what I am doing right now. So before adding more, I'm also still going to place my hemming gum just like this. Just cut your hemming gum and place it and give it a very good press, and you have your cup. Okay, so after fleshing the cup, this is what I have. Can you see? So you can see that you can't even see that you can no longer see the boning, and this is what the main cup, that's the main fabric. This is what it looks like. You can see I also ironed the seam lines open. So now the next thing we're going to do is to sew the yoke. Now to stitch the back yoke. Here I have this piece of fabric I created for the button loops, and it is as long as 6 inches. So I folded it into two and I'm cutting it into two. So here I have 3 inches for one and 3 inches for the other. So I'm going to have two buttons at the back. So you can see I placed the net right side of the net facing right side, okay? So basically I just placed it facing each other. And then I'm placing the loop now, the button loop. Just watch carefully what I'm doing. I'm going to place the button loop half inch downwards from the neckline. And I am placing it on top. I'm not placing it in between now. Can you see? I'm not placing it in between the fabric. Here I'm doing French finishing. So I didn't place it in between the two nets. I placed it on top of it. And you can see that the net is facing the left side while the loop is facing the right side. So I've pinned it. I'm going to stitch on half inch. I'm going to stitch on quarter inch from the neckline down to the center back all the way down to the hem. Okay, that's it. So here I'm stitching on quarter inch. My sewing allowance is half inch, but because I am doing French finishing, I'm stitching on quarter inch first. Okay, so after stitching, I'm going to reduce my sewing allowance. I'll be reducing this quarter inch to the barest minimum. Then I'm going to turn it to the other side and top stitch it. So when reducing the seam allowance, make sure you shift your loop, that's the button loop, so that you don't mistakenly cut it. Okay, so this is it here. So next I'm going to turn this fabric now. I'll turn it inside out, and then I'll top stitch on the remaining quarter inch. So now that you can see I've turned it inside, can you see that the button loop now is in between the two fabrics? That's in between the lining and the main fabric, and I'm stitching on quarter inch. And then I'm going to stitch all the way down, and then I'll turn it out and we'll see what we have. Okay, so this is what our back yoke looks like. You see, so it is neatly finished. So this is how to do your French finishing when working with yoke. So of course I'm going to give it a good press, but I'll have to sew the other ones first before I'll take them to my machine and my pressing table and give it a good press. So exactly what I have done on the left, or that's on the one with the loop, is what I'll repeat on the other side. But of course the other side does not have the loops, so this is even easier to work with. All I need to do is to stitch on quarter inch and then turn it and stitch again. So this is it. So you can see after stitching, I joined the shoulders of the front and back. You can see how neat it is already. You see everything is coming out neat and beautiful. So the next thing we're going to do now is to stitch the yoke to the corset. So this is going to be for this side. You want to make sure that you don't mistakenly interchange them. But right now, this yoke does not really have a right side or a wrong side. Net is net, so any side you decide to use is fine. So here, this is the front here. So you want to make sure that you place the back at the back and then the front at the front. So I'm going to place the yoke on the right side of the corset, leaving my ½ inch seam allowance. Remember, I added ½ inch for all the parts, on all the parts. So I'll pin it down here. So this is the side here. That's why the fact that I have a body, I know where the side is. So I want to make sure to pin it exactly on the side. So here, this is this point where it's supposed to be at the side. I'll use my pin to hold it down. And then I'm going to stretch out the back. Just make sure that it's well aligned. So can you see that the yoke is longer than the corset? Remember when we were drafting, I cut out 1.5 inches where I said I'm going to have my eyelet. So you want to make sure that you still have that 1.5 inches. So that's why I have the yoke longer than the back. So this point where I have this 1.5 inches, I'll hold it down and then give it a notch at that point, okay? So I'll notch that point. So I'm going to place the net right side facing the right side, and then I'll stitch on ½ inch there so that I can turn it out. You don't want to leave it rough because we're going to use ½ inch to stitch the yoke to the corset. So I'm just going to stitch from the center back to that particular point where I have the notch, and then I'll trim out my excess. So trim out my excess and turn it back to the that's to the right side. Can you see? So this is it. Okay, so after doing that, I'm going to place the yoke on the right side of the back, and then I'm going to stitch it. I'll stitch it on ½ inch. So you can see that this point, the part I already stitched close, you can see that it is going to stop exactly at the where the eyelet panel stops. Okay, so this is it. So can you see? Just watch carefully. Can you see that it stops exactly at that point? So you can see that it just extends outward there. That's that 1.5 inches I cut out. So after doing this, I'm going to reduce my sewing allowance, and then I'll use my bias tip to neatly finish up this part. So first I'm going to fold the bias tip at the starting point by ½ inch. Just want to fold in the rough part, and then I'll place the bias here and stitch on ½ inch. I'll stitch on ½ inch all the way to this part, and then at the end here I will fold in ½ inch also. That's after I have trimmed out the excess fabric. So you can see I'm folding in ½ inch as well. So before folding in the ½ inch, I'm going to trim out my excess sewing allowance. So now this is what I'm going to have. So I'll fold in ½ inch like this, fold in this part, and then fold again. So to top stitch this facing now, sorry, to top stitch this bias now, you have to shift away the net. Can you see? I shifted away the net. Don't leave the net under. Don't leave the net under. If not, you will stitch on the net. So make sure you shift away the net and then top stitch only on the corset. Okay, so after stitching the yoke to the back piece, can you see what we have? Can see how beautiful and neat it is. So I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side of the back, and then I'm going to show us the next thing to do. So the next thing I'll be doing now is to neatly finish the bust bridge. So here I have my bias. I'll place it on the right side of the bust bridge, and I'll stitch on ½ inch. The width of the bias is just the same 1.5 I've been using for all the other bias. So I'm going to place it here and stitch on ½ inch, and then I will cut out the excess and flip it to the reverse side, and then fold ½ inch and fold ½ inch again, and then top stitch it. So this is just it. So I'll stitch it and then trim out my excess. So we're going to be draping our yoke on the corset. That's the front yoke. We're going to be draping it on it. So that is why I'm finishing off this part. Okay, so now it's time for us to sew the cup to the corset. As you can see, I've stitched one side of the cup already. So I'll be using the second one to show us how to stitch it. So first you will notice that the one with the bust cage, which is the one that is the lining, the half inch I left round, I folded in that half inch. Can you see I ironed that half inch in? You see, I just folded it in and I pressed it. So now I'm going to place the cup. Remember that I have my half inch for sewing allowance at the upper part. So I'm placing the cup that's to the bust bridge, and you can see I'm leaving that half inch out. Now watch carefully. I'm placing the corset over the cup. There are different ways to sew your cup, your bust caging, but this is one of the this is the method I'm using here in this case. So you can see I'm placing it over it and I'm pinning it down, placing half inch. That's at the half inch, which is my sewing allowance. So I'm letting half inch overlap. That's just it, to overlap on top of the cup. And you look at the upper part of the cup, that's the starting point of the cup. I left my half inch sewing allowance there. Okay. So if you watch carefully what I'm doing, you're going to get it very right. So this is me just going ahead to pin the cup round. So I'm making sure that what I am allowing to climb on top of the cup is just the half inch, which is my sewing allowance. You don't want to do more than that, please. Just be very careful when you are doing this. And you see, so this is what it looks like on the reverse side. This is me making sure to tuck in that half inch, that extra half inch that I have round the cup. Okay, so and then I'm going to sew from the wrong side, that's from the reverse side. So you want to just make sure that you're doing so. That why I'm sewing from the wrong side is so that I'm top stitching directly, making sure that the half inch that we ironed in is sitting right under the cup. You don't want some part of it sticking outside. Please, you want to do this as neat as possible. Okay, so remember I already pinned the corset itself to the cup, so my half inch is actually there underneath the cup. So take your time to do this part and you will love the outcome. Okay, so after stitching the cup, this is what I have. So you can see this is what it looks like on the reverse side. Very, very neat. So now it's time for us to place the main fabric. So I can now take off my pins because I have stitched it already and the cup is in place. So now I'm going to place the cup on the that's right side of the cup facing right side. So basically this is now right side facing right side. Okay, can you see? So I'm going to stitch on that half inch I have up here, which is the sewing allowance. So that means I'm using the half inch to turn the cup. And you see? So right now I'm stitching exactly at the half inch I have at the upper part, the half inch sewing allowance I left at the upper part. And then I'm going to flip it. That's turn it to the right side. Then now I'm going to tuck in the half inch sewing allowance. So I'll have to tuck it in. Can you see? So you want to make sure that you stretch it out very well so that the cup sits well. So I'll tuck it in and pin it down. Use my pins to secure it. I'll do the same thing at this point. Just make sure you're tucking it in. Watch carefully the way I'm stretching it out. You don't want to do this without strength. So make sure you are doing it very well, okay? So that you fold in your sewing allowance. So I'll keep doing this till I get to the other end of the cup. So please take your time at this point. You can see our corset is almost ready. So you don't want to have any mistake around here, okay? So I'll tuck it in like this, and then here I am at the other end, and this is what we have. Can you see? So I'm going to now top stitch the cup. So I'll be top stitching on the right side, so you can see. So you try as much as possible to make sure that the presser foot of your machine is stitching exactly at the edge of these cups. And then while doing this, I'm going to be gradually taking out my safety pins. And you see, so just do this gently, gently, gently. Tuck it in. If you notice that as you are stitching, anyone removes, just take your time gently and then stitch it. Tuck it in before stitching. You don't want to have anyone showing outside, please. Okay. So after top stitching the cup, this is what I have. Can you see? Came out nice and beautiful. Can you see how beautiful and how well sitting our cup is sitting? It's really fine. It's not flat. Okay. So the next thing we want to do now is to drape the yoke on the corset. So this is the front yoke. First, I got the midpoint of the yoke, placing the sweetheart neckline, and then now I'm placing half inch over the cup. So remember, my sewing allowance is half inch, so you want to make sure that it's that half inch you are placing on top of the corset itself. Can you see? So I'm just draping with that half inch, and then I will do the same thing at this side. So when you are doing boss caging, or you are draping your cup, or you are draping your yoke rather, have it at the back of your mind that you have to use embellishment. It's either you bead it or you use appliques to that's to tack appliques to those areas. That's the cup area. That's the part where we are placing our yoke. Okay, you don't want to leave it like that. Most luxury outfits, they are draped, so you see them, they are well beaded and all that. Okay, so here is the side. I'm going to make sure that it meets the side of the back. So any excess I have there, I'm going to trim it out. So you can see that I have an excess here, so I'll just trim out the excess and leave half inch. So that half inch I have there, I'll just tuck it in. Remember that the back I also have its half inch, so I'll tuck it in. You can see how they are meeting here at this point. So here, this is it. I have the armhole where I'm going to sew the sleeve. So this is not affecting the size of the armhole. You want to make sure that when you are doing this, your yoke takes the whole armhole measurement. Please make sure that your yoke takes the whole armhole measurement, just like mine. And this is what it looks like. I went ahead to fix my basic sleeve, and you can see our transparent corset came out very, very, very beautiful. I really love the outcome. I hope you also love what you see and you learned something from this video. In my next video, I'm going to be showing us how to do the lace placement on this corset. I'm going to be placing a lace on this corset, and I'll also show us how we'll be creating eyelets. Okay, I'll be fixing the eyelets to the back. So I think the eyelet video will come first before the lace placement, or whichever one. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, please make sure to like this video, share this video with your friends, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and see you in my next one. Bye.